This is how wealthy people stay wealthy. All of it reeks of a decline. If your country's so great, why do you gotta make people stay? So I like this channel too. I follow him all the time. Nomad Capitalist is his name. And I haven't watched any of this, but let's see a man's look. So he's got a 100-year plan, the safest places, taxes in the USA, life in the USA. So when you're thinking about living in a country, what is it going to look like not only for yourself, but your kids and your grandkids? You want to put down roots in a place that in 100 years could look like absolute, well, lack for a better word, dog shit. A shell of its former self? Or do you want to go in a place where investment, where growth, where the future looks bright? Do you think the future of San Francisco looks bright? Do you think the future of Miami, of Atlanta, of New York, of Washington, DC, all these places, it looks bright? You're going to say that it'll look much better than it does in the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years? All indicators point no.
I'm going to go through some of the lesser discussed reasons for living overseas, things that my friends and I have recently been discussing, things that you may not have thought about as a benefit of living in a smaller country that has lower taxes, beyond the tax savings, beyond the weather, beyond the lifestyle. I'm going to share some of those with you today. So this all started with a conversation. I have a friend who lives in South America, and his friends back in Canada constantly say, "Aren't you unsafe down there?" And he's pretty much given up convincing them because at a certain point, it's not our job to convince other people. If you'd like to go where you're treated best you can. For him, he likes living in South America, and he's created a very favorable tax.
And remember, this is always how they keep you here pinned down like a little slave. 100% fear mongering. They tell you that it's unsafe. You're going to die if you go anywhere else. America's the safest place where you get shanked in the middle of buying a coffee at Starbucks while your family watches. Yes, very safe over here. How many public tragedies have we had in the past few weeks? I'm sorry, but I think I just read another one just happened here. They're starting to become a weekly ordeal in the United States. Any day could be your last, apparently, if you go out in public to do anything, because some nut job.
Situation. He has great weather. He's got a great, social environment. He's very happy down there. And so what he mentioned to me, though, was in light of the current geopolitical situation, the countries in South America aren't trying to start a world war, or they're not playing geopolitical games, however you want to look at it. You can be just as safe in these countries as you would be in Canada or the United States or anywhere else. In fact, in some cases, it's actually better. You can save a lot of money in the process, and your life will probably be a lot happier detaching from all the things that are causing you to question whether any other country besides yours is actually worth living in. Because I can tell you, out of 252 countries and territories, there are probably plenty of places where you could be very happy living, reducing your taxes, increasing your freedom.
Only in America they say don't leave your house without your gat. Imagine land of the free. So free you got to walk with your pistol on your hip anywhere you go just in case.
Bettering your lifestyle and avoiding the next world war. I'm Andrew Henderson. I'm the founder of Nomad Capitalist. Over the last decade, we've helped over 1,000 high and ultra high net worth individuals, from entrepreneurs to investors, legally reduce their taxes overseas, increase their freedom with dual citizenship, and grow their opportunities in all the countries that there are to choose from. You can learn more at nomadcapitalist.com. And so I'm going to walk you through why I left my home country, in my case, the United States, go against some conventional wisdom that you may have heard, and then talk about the reality of what it's like to live overseas. And these are the things that I've been thinking about why I choose to live overseas. I grew up in the United States. I got into politics at a very early age. But I realized at a certain point as a young entrepreneur in my 20s that I'm paying a lot of money for a culture that doesn't really value what I'm doing to the extent it once did. The opportunities are getting smaller. They're taking more of my money. That's only going to get worse in the coming years. I didn't like the growing toxicity of the culture. I think it's much worse since I left, actually, and I kind of saw that coming. I didn't like the politics. I didn't like this idea that if you want lower taxes, you've got to vote for some guy, and then you hope he gets in, and if enough of them get in, they're going to lower your taxes, or if you want lower regulations, or if you want whatever, right? I just thought that the government was very heavy-handed, and to the point of, if you live in a Western country that's involved in all these geopolitical issues around the world, either causing them, responding to them, sticking their nose into them, where you live could be a target. I'm not saying that I ever lived in fear of that in the United States, but I didn't like the politics. I didn't like traveling the world as an American. I didn't like showing my U.S. passport. Really, taxes really never played into my decision to want to leave. I wanted to see other cultures. I wanted to see the opportunities that were emerging in the world, and I just wanted to be from a country that I thought was really heading in the wrong direction. The U.S. certainly does have a small core of winners, and that's what has made it a successful country. I think it will become less and less of that in the years to come for a number of cultural and social factors. But the culture generally, to me, in the U.S., outside of that core circle of winners, is just a bad culture. I didn't think I'd fit in. And as a bonus, when I figured out, hey, I don't want to live here anymore, I started researching why I was paying so much in taxes. I'm like, okay, what happens if I move to another country? What happens with my taxes? And the answer is, if you're an American, you will have to file taxes and report your foreign bank accounts and report your foreign corporations no matter where you go. But you can still dramatically reduce, if not eliminate, the taxes that you pay, especially if you're an entrepreneur. And so even though the U.S. makes it more of a hassle, you can still reduce that. Anybody else, there's a procedure you can go through and just get out of the tax net, and then you can do what you want. That's what we help people do at Nomad Capitalist. We do the financial planning, the immigration planning, the lifestyle planning. We ask people hundreds of questions as our client, and we create a holistic plan, and then we plug people into our network of hundreds of attorneys and accountants and real estate agents and experts all around the world, managing those people from a multi-jurisdictional perspective, because nobody in any other country probably knows how you have to live your life based on being a U.S. citizen. And so we basically bridge that gap for folks by making sure everyone's singing from the same sheet of music. The conventional wisdom is that where you live is safe and everything else stinks. And so when I talk to Australians, they think their country is the safest. When I talk to Americans, they think their country is the safest. Australia is safer than the United States. If you look at the U.S. like murder rates, it's in the lower third of countries in the world. The U.S. Virgin Islands, the U.S. territory, has the fourth highest murder rate in the world. Doesn't mean that you will be murdered, but it means if we're looking at statistics, you can do better. So your country isn't as safe as you think unless you're living in Liechtenstein or the UAE or Iceland or Georgia or any of the countries that have very, very low crime numbers. And so the conventional wisdom is wrong. Everywhere else doesn't suck. There are plenty of other safe places, and that includes whether you look at it from violent crime.
Rocco, I love how he always talks about how he renounces his U.S. citizenship and warns us that the U.S. is now trying to F us who want to renounce.
Property crime, health.
Yeah, isn't that a weird juxtapose? So people were defecting from communist countries in the 90s, right? Or 80s and 90s, risking their life to leave the Iron Curtain. Now the United States is trying to dissuade people from renouncing their citizenship. If your country's so great, why do you got to make people stay? That's what we used to say about communist countries, right?
Safety, access to healthcare. There was one report that said that maternal deaths, like during childbirth, in some parts of Texas are not the same level as Syria. And so if you live in New York City, that may not matter to you. But if you look at the country as a whole, your country isn't the best place to be. The idea that your country is the best that it gets is also conventional wisdom, even when you don't like it. And so I feel like people often defend the country much like they would defend, a bad marriage, for example. Like it's just, they don't want to admit that they're in the wrong place. But the reality is it's easier than ever to buy a plane ticket, get immigration to any number of countries that will roll out the welcome mat for you if you've got income, if you've got money to invest, if you have money in the bank, if you've got a business to start. If you have an ancestor from there, you can get residence or citizenship. You can move there. You can plug yourself into a better tax system. So the reality for me is the following. Why I live overseas is because I understand these things. Number one, that anywhere can be safe, even Colombia. I have a home in Colombia. I spend some time there. I have at one time I've had a threat of having property crime where I'm holding my phone and the guy wanted to take the phone from me. He did not succeed. No violence ensued. I relearned the lesson that I already knew, which is don't carry your phone around in Colombia. Can you do that and get away with it most of the time? Sure. And can you do it in most other countries and get away with it entirely? Yes. Whenever we have people from our team from Georgia travel other places, they're always walking around, with the phone. They're just always carrying it around because in Georgia, there's like zero property crime. If you leave your phone in a taxi, the taxi driver will find you and return your phone to you. They'll return your laptop. They'll return your camera. We've heard all these stories from folks that we know. So anywhere can be safe. Most places are statistically safer than your country if you're from, let's say, the United States. Again, Canada and Australia are better. But crime in some Western countries is going in the wrong direction. Look at a place like Germany, for example. And again, look at property crime versus violent crime. You can protect better against property crime. If you want to have homes around the world, as I do, maybe you want to have those be apartments where you have some kind of built-in security, where you've got better than a house, for example, and so you can protect against that. Violent crime for me is the issue, and there's plenty of places in Eastern Europe, the Gulf, East and Southeast Asia, places like Singapore, places like Korea, where you can live much better. And there's plenty of other places where it's just normal, right? And if you're going to live in Bogota, you're going to live in the nice neighborhood the same way you live in the nice neighborhood in Chicago or Sydney or London. You're not going to move to the slums. If you live in the slums now, maybe you want to live in the slums there. But I would say if you live in the slums in Chicago, you can certainly work your way out of that. For the taxes that you'll save moving to other countries or to another country or to a combination of other countries, following my trifecta method where you basically have 3 different homes, I mean, you could bloody hire a private army if you've got that much to take. And so, I mean, we have people who save $500,000, $1 million, millions, multi-millions of dollars a year. And the beauty of saving taxes when you go overseas is there's not much trial and error. You follow the rules, you set your structures up properly, and the money just comes in as long as you live overseas. And so if you think security is that bad, hire a security guy. I mean, we had one of our speakers come down to the first Nomad Capitalist Live in 2021 down to Playa del Carmen. He said, I got to have security when I travel outside of the U.S.
Rocco, in America, we don't speak English, we speak Section 8.
He realized in 2 seconds, I don't need the security. I'm just going to hang around. Just leave me alone. But if you wanted that security, it's obviously very affordable to hire. You can also stay in your own bubble. If you want to create your own bubble, I certainly caution against doing this to too much of an extent. I see some people following the herd. They go to Bangkok, they go to Medellin, they go to the same places. We started talking about Tbilisi. Now a bunch of people want to go to Tbilisi. Glad to have that, but I want to make sure you don't create too much of a bubble. But if you need that bubble to feel comfortable, you certainly can do it. And so you've got a bubble where you live. That bubble is probably strangling you. It's probably strangling your potential. Your net worth is that of the average of your 5 closest friends, your salary or your net worth. You could go overseas and you could build a more intentional lifestyle that allows you to grow faster. And so I think get out of the bubble. But if you need the bubble, there's expats in plenty of places around the world, and that's the reality. You can dial up and down the cultural richness when you want. And so I like living in a place like Malaysia, for example, because I have all the local foods in a multicultural country. Indian food, one of the best cuisines in the world. I go to my little hole-in-the-wall Indian place that I've been going to for a decade. They know me. It's fantastic. And yet if I want to go and have a Five Guys hamburger and a milkshake, I can also do that. If I want to go to Nobu, if I want to go to a steakhouse overlooking the Petronas Towers, I've got the ability to dial it up and down. I can also eat in the street. And so I can figure out how much time I want to spend with locals. And so I'm a member of a club where it is largely locals. They are more upscale locals. I can go there. But I can also do things that I'm used to doing. And so if you want expats around you, you get to control that. You don't get that where you live because everyone where you live is like you, has the same perspectives. There's no cultural friction to help you improve, to help you find new opportunities, to help you discover more about yourself. But if you want the bubble, you can have it. One of the other reasons I like, though, living overseas is you get to watch the world unfolding before your eyes. And my thesis is if we're planning for the next 100 years, where is it I want to invest? Where is it I want to be a citizen? Where is it I want my money to be stored? Where do I want my kids to work? The answer is probably somewhere different than where you are right now, if you're being honest with yourself, in terms of where the world economy is going to go. And so by living overseas and living in different countries, and by traveling to different countries, maybe you live and you follow my global citizen sandwich, where you store your assets in Singapore, live in Malaysia, and then you spend occasional business trips, checking out opportunities that you invested in Cambodia, India, Indonesia, Vietnam, what have you.
You see, emerging markets. You live in store money in one that has a well-backed financial system, live and work in the other because the culture suits you, and you invest in another nation or basket of nations that are developing economies, emerging markets where your money goes the furthest. This is how wealthy people stay wealthy. This is your only option as a normal person saving up. You need to save up money. You need to invest in yourself, in your own education, and figure out a way to work remotely or earn a high-paying job. And you have to invest in emerging markets. The easiest way that people have here is if you're of Mexican descent, they'll typically go back to Mexico and invest in property there. That's the easiest. I've had a ton of friends that were Mexican descent. And what they do is they'll go back in Mexico, invest in property, Airbnb them out. Easy peasy. You already speak Spanish. You got family that lives out there, blah, blah, blah. Same with immigrants in general. Immigrants that come here from, say, Europe or Africa or wherever, the rest of Latin America, they will earn here, but invest back home because you get much more for the money you make here. All the smart ones take their money and leave into places that are growing and that look beautiful, and so much construction is happening, so much investment, so much growth. I don't think you guys understand, dude, what it's like to go into a city that the skyline is just changing what it seems like overnight. There are cranes everywhere. There's things being demolished and rebuilt everywhere. Blows you away to see the growth in some places. Meanwhile, where I've lived in places like Phoenix and LA or Atlanta, all these other places, I got metal plates in the middle of the road that haven't been paved over for months at a time. I have alleyways that I have to drive through that you got homeless tent encampments all over the place. Shuttered buildings, busted up doors. All of it reeks of a decline instead of a growth phase.
And so, you know, what Jim Rogers, when we interviewed him, the adventure capitalist, great book, you know, he wanted to live in Singapore because he believes the 21st century will belong to Asia, and better to watch it unfold in front of your eyes, better to be close to it, better to be connected to it. That's a certain thing that's hard to replicate with a Zoom call. If you
Rocco, there's no more growth anymore in the U.S. Men, get your passports.
You are a really frontier investor and you really want to build a tremendous growth business,
Yeah, you know, the most disgusting part of this is someone wrote human feces, JC in chat, is that you can literally be living in San Francisco paying $45,000 to $5,000 a month on rent, and outside of your apartment steps where you walk out, there's a guy tweaking, injecting himself with drugs, or somebody else taking a shit near your stairs. We call this progress. You're paying $5,000 a month.
We've had a few folks over the years who build businesses in Africa. They're making huge returns. Same thing in maybe some frontier Asian markets, huge returns. If you want to be an investor, you get in early, you could do very well. But you have to a certain extent, be there to watch it unfold. You also, by living overseas,
Yeah, that's a very important distinction if you're going to be somebody that's willing to invest in emerging markets. Don't expect to park your ass over there in these countries and have everything available at your fingertips already fully built out, done. You've arrived too late. You're supposed to invest in markets where things are on the up and starting to develop, and land being demolished and everything is being partitioned and the city is sprouting before your very eyes like a weed. That's where you go and invest. Hell, you could even live there too. You could be one of the people that says, when I moved here, this entire area of the city didn't exist. It's been built up overnight. That's where you've made the right decision.
Determine the freedoms that you value. And I think a lot of folks are...
Yeah, I have an African friend too that, I won't bother saying the country, but he's going to invest and he's buying an entire, like, I can't even say how many acres and plots of land that he's buying within city limits that he's going to build out and develop. Not only is he buying land, but he's going to develop the land and create entire shopping malls and parking lots and all this sort of commerce on his property. He's invested back home where he came from in his country in Africa. And it's going to be amazing, dude. That's going to set him up for life.
Afraid to move because how will I homeschool? The answer is the same way you homeschool now. Where will I get medical care? Medical care will be better and it'll be cheaper. It'll be more caring. You know, where do I have certain social liberties? You get to determine the freedoms that you value. And so there's folks this year, when Roe v. Wade was overturned in the U.S., people that don't agree with that. Great. There's countries in Europe that respect that. There's people who, are looking for greater gay rights. There's countries that respect that. There's also countries that are very conservative for folks who want that. There's countries that allow homeschooling and countries that don't. But imagine that you're a citizen of a country like Germany where they frown on homeschooling. They don't want you to do it. Is that a good thing or a bad thing if you want to homeschool? But you don't have the freedom, right? What kind of medical care do you want? Figure out what you have is available. And so for me, at 38 years old, I get health checkups. I like to be, have health care available to me, but I'm not doing intense medical procedures. And so while I live in places, especially Malaysia, where there's excellent healthcare. I don't build my entire life around it. But if I did want to build my entire life around that, then yeah, I probably would not be going and living in Ecuador. I wouldn't be spending my time in Georgia unless I just thought I was going to fly to Istanbul or Dubai whenever I needed something. But if I thought I needed emergency care, I wouldn't live in that kind of place, perhaps. Not that people don't get emergency care there, but if I want the best, sure, I'm not going to live in some up-and-coming places. But I will live in places that have an established quality of care. I would live, if I want to homeschool, in a country like Georgia, which is open to homeschooling. Many countries in emerging parts of the world are open to homeschooling.
So
and you
nice.
can hire tutors, either from that country or from some other country, and get them a residence permit. They can move there, right? So you get to choose what's important to you. And then, to the point of my friend, you get to stay out of the blast radius. I do think if you're building the ultimate plan B as a wealthy person, I see wealthy folks, buying bunkers in places like the U.S. The better thing to me would be to have residence in Uruguay, residence in Paraguay, residence in Mauritius, residence in some place that's affordable. I think there's probably a lot of better deals than New Zealand, which is kind of the billionaire's choice, the bunker choice. But you can find more affordable versions of that in the Southern Hemisphere, in places that are far away. Certainly, a Caribbean island where you can get citizenship by investment is probably not ticking off a lot of other people geopolitically. But if you want to be even further away from, let's say, Western sphere of influence, if you want to be away from the world wars, why not have some kind of residence? And if you can work that towards citizenship, do that. Right? You could get citizenship by investment in Vanuatu, not a great passport, but if you want to be in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, far away from it all, I guess not so far if you're from Australia or New Zealand, but far away from everything else, that's a place that has remained relatively neutral. They're not getting entangled in some of the craziness in the world. Having a citizenship there means you can always get in. Right? It also means you can fly through Australia or New Zealand, even if you would otherwise need a visa, to go back to your country. Wouldn't be the worst thing to have in your back pocket, some kind of access to a place that's out of the blast radius, and certainly a place that minds its own business. Those places are smaller countries. They're in the Southern Hemisphere to some extent. And so that's something that you can set up now, even if you don't want to move overseas. But I think that once you start building your offshore banking, once you start getting your residences and citizenships, even if you just plan on having those as what I would call infrastructure to not move, you're going to start being curious about what you're missing out on by not spending at least part of your time overseas. And when you live overseas, you're going to realize that there's a lot of opportunities that's going to help you grow as a person. It's going to help you grow your wealth, grow your business, and it's really a great way to live.
Again, I have to preface this that you have to become a producer, not a consumer.
Today I'm going to go through.
You have to start a business in some form or another. That's your ticket to freedom. You're not going to get to this step in life if you're a worker working for somebody else. That's the absolute brutal truth. If you are working for somebody right now, your ticket to financial freedom is gravely limited. You are in danger and at the whims of the person who signs your checks.